4th of July. It's 100 degrees outside. I'm leaving for vacation tomorrow, and I need to smoke a brisket and 3 racks of ribs before then. So let's go do that real quick. What's up, friends? Thanks for going on that barbecue adventure with me. I'm Chad Brooks. I'm a pastor here in North Louisiana. I make videos about the Bible, the spiritual life, and the everyday life of a pastor. And this is my video on all the books I read in the month of June. Last month, this video kind of came late. I'm leaving for vacation. I want to get this one out to you because I make these videos to keep myself accountable because I want to read more. Also, just to share the stuff I'm reading. People tend to ask me that kind of stuff a lot. So these are the books that I read in the month of June. Got a decent amount of reading done. So let's just walk through this. Number one, first book, A.W. Tozer, The Church. I talked about this in a video a couple weeks ago. I love A.W. Tozer. I'm always reading A.W. Tozer. I think if anybody probably has theologically formed and shaped me, it's A.W. Tozer. He's the GOAT for me. And this book is a collection of sermons and articles and other things that he wrote, and it's all about the church. It's about the power of the local church. I did this in my devotion time this month, and it's just super, super solid. Now, this book is part of a set. This is the last part of the set I had to finish. There's 5 or 6 of them. If you want me to do a video about the whole set, just drop in the comments below and say, "Hey, Chad, I want to hear about the Tozer set." I'll put that one in the docket. That'd be kind of a fun video to make anyway. But I think that this matters, and why I think this idea of thinking about the church matters is because when we recover the value of what does it mean for us to be the bride of Christ, not just this random collection of individuals doing our own thing, but to understand that we're the bride of Christ. And that means that the particular workings of a particular group of people in a particular place, in a particular time, following Jesus in a particular way, that's what the church is. And I just said particular a lot of times. So the next book I finished this month, and this is different. This is the first time. I actually read this book twice, and I reread this book. I read it last summer, but I didn't mark it up. I didn't annotate it at all. And I found this book to be really, really beneficial over the last year, thinking about its principles and learning more about the 2 authors, that I decided I need to read it again. I need to annotate it again. But it's Extreme Ownership by Leif Babin and Jocko Willink. They're the owners of Echelon Front, a leadership company. They're also Navy SEALs, and they were part of the leadership of the Battle of Ramadi in 2006. And these are books that are just a handful of leadership principles that they believe transfer over into everything. Jocko is also a big fan of the phrase discipline equals freedom. And the whole book is really about what does it mean to realize that you have ownership over everything, regardless if you're in church or not in charge. And that absolutely changes the game when you're willing to recognize and accept your ownership and to lead in that manner. So, solid book, good book. I'm going to one of their events in a few months, and it made me just kind of want to, get more into understanding their stuff. The next book I read this month is on my Kindle, Jonathan Haidt's The Anxious Generation. This is one of the hot books that's making the rounds right now. But it's asking a lot of questions about the rise in mental health, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and suicide amongst young people starting in around 2010. And Haidt calls Gen Z the anxious generation, or really anybody born after 1995, the anxious generation, because they have never known a world without smartphones and social media, and that we're not realizing just the total psychological, biological, neurological effects of what happens when we expose people to these devices, especially younger people. But here's a quote from Haidt from the book. By designing a fire hose of addictive content that entered through kids' eyes and ears, and by displacing physical play and impersonal socializing, these companies have rewired childhood and changed human development on almost an unimaginable scale. The most intense period of this rewiring was 2010 to 2015, although the story I will tell begins with a rise of fearful and overprotective parenting in the 80s and continues through the COVID pandemic to the present day. Haidt was also one of the authors of a book that came out a few years ago called The Coddling of the American Mind, which I'm a big fan of that book as well. If you've got kids, if you work with people that are younger, any of that, if you are, I think anybody, like if you feel like you're addicted to this thing, you need to read this book. I'll tell you what, this book has made me really think about my screen time and how much I'm just using my device randomly throughout the day. So, The Anxious Generation, Jonathan Haidt, one of those is there. Fourth book I read this month is Nadia Williams, Cultural Christians in the Early Church. Now, I heard her on the Context Matters podcast a couple months back, and she was talking about a passage that I was actually going to be preaching the next week. So I went and bought the book on Kindle just to get some more information because I thought it was interesting the way she was talking. I loved the chapter so much, I just read the whole book. And the question she's asking is this: what is cultural Christianity, and is it confined only to the 20th and 21st century? I'm all over conversations like this. Y'all know I like to think sociologically so many times. So I'm all over conversations like this. But I'm also all over any conversation about church history in the early church. And what Williams does is she shows that cultural Christianity is not a modern phenomena. It's not a new problem, and she walks through how the people that were following Jesus or just the culture around them in the 1st and 3rd century were dealing with so many of the same things that we're dealing with, albeit maybe in a different particular manner or something like that. Both good and bad. Did a really, really solid job doing this. The book's really recent, which is something I kind of value a lot now. Did this book come out in the last 18 months or so? And it did. And one of the things I like about that is, if you're on if you're on Christian Twitter or X or whatever you choose to call it, and you're seeing the ways that Christian folks kind of argue about the same things in a circular way on there. She brings up leggings gate in the book. But she does a really good job interacting with all of just like the culture wars type stuff and the ways that, we can be fundamentalist on a spectrum of things right now. So Williams does a good job with that, but she talks about politics. She talks about sexuality, talks about wealth, talks about influence, influencers, all of that. It's a great book. If you've never read any early church or church fathers and you kind of want an introduction to it and you're curious about what might be one, this book could be. This book could be a really solid introduction into early church reading. And so if you're thinking about that, jump into it. Last part of the video, and I do this every single month, is I share where I am updated on reading this massive tome, Charles Taylor's A Secular Age. I began June on page 374, and I began July on page 423. So I got 50 pages. I traveled a lot this month. I don't bring this book with me when I travel because it's not just this massive book, but it's also a notebook and then typically a copy of Jamie Smith's book, How Not to Be Secular. But every morning I go and I actually read in that room where I trim the brisket, make a cup of coffee, sit there in my lawn chair because I don't have a chair in there yet. And I just read Charles Taylor. But what I liked about it this month is we got into the 19th century, which I was more familiar with, but it also got more into British and American thought, which is something else I know a little bit more about. And what was interesting was what Taylor kind of ran across all those pages. Is, what does it mean for secular thought to control you when you're living in a Judeo-Christian paradigm? How Britain, and what it means to be British, like the formal idea of the Britishness. Part of it is this particular form of Protestantism known as the Church of England, and how even if you don't believe in God, this identity of the Church of England is part of the formation of being British. And then in America, he talked about providential deism. He talked about manifest destiny and how those really form our language of origin. And we struggle with individualism in our country and with liberty and freedom. This video's on July 4th. It's all the things that we're like blowing fireworks up about today are such a huge part of who we are. But it's been secularized into this manifest destiny with these pseudo-religious language that's drawing into it. But we feel like we have the right to always be winning, to always be getting what we want, and for things to always work out for us. And then when we move into a secular stage where the removal of God from things, we don't get what we want, and we don't have a controlling paradigm or a universal being or a deity to think these things through, what then happens is we actually get this internally massive sense of a loss of meaning where we really don't know what to do is connected to it. So that's where I'm in that book right now. Still loving A Secular Age, hoping to finish it next few months. So I'm going on vacation tomorrow. I mentioned that. This is my book stack that I bring into vacation because that's what I do at vacation. I read books and sit down. I got another Jocko and Leif Babin book there. Got some stuff from Winston Churchill. Got a really interesting book I'm excited about from Alan Creeder, one of my favorite early church scholars, that talks about conversion and the origin of Christendom. And then Robin Dunbar's book on Friends. He's a psychologist that I like a lot. So at least those 5 books are going. But know with me, I'll probably throw in more stuff in the box in case I get bored with that. But this has been what I've read this month. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What did you read this last month? Is there something you think I need to read? Do you want to engage with kind of one of those books or whatever? You can do that. Also, I've got emails. I write emails to really 3 different groups of people, and you can sign up for those emails in the link below. That's in the description. But until next time, I'll see y'all later on Chad Brooks. Thanks for hanging out on the internet, and let's hang out together in the comments. See y'all soon.